day. This one. I think we are live on 2 out of 3 cameras. Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for watching and coming in today. Once again, it is my pleasure. I'm Avi Abelo here with the one and only Melanie Phillips.
Hello, Avi. Again.
How are you?
Very well, very well.
How's the week been?
The week has been relatively undramatic from my point of view. That is to say, I haven't got myself into more trouble than I usually get myself into.
I'll take that as a good sign. All right. So let's go straight into it today. Big issues. And let's start off with Britain-Israel issue. Mm-hmm. Very soon, I think only a week away, Prince Williams will be coming on his first visit, and the first official visit, if I'm not mistaken, of the British family since Israel's establishment 70 years ago.
It is indeed the first official visit by the British royal family. And that's not because the British royal family doesn't want to come to Israel. We have no idea what they personally think, because they personally don't think anything under the British Constitution. The only reason why the British royal family goes anywhere is at the behest of the Foreign Office, because they're representing Great Britain and the foreign policy of the United Kingdom.
Right.
And for all kinds of reasons, none of which are good, Britain's Foreign Office has never thought it appropriate or right or politic to send the royal family to Israel, because this would have been seen, they always thought, as an impremature, as a sign of approval of the state of Israel, and they always felt that the Arab world would take such a dim view and their interest lay with the Arab world. Now, everything seems to have changed in that the heir to the throne, Prince William, Duke of Cambridge, is about to visit Israel as the first royal visit. And one can speculate as to why this has happened, but it's a change of circumstances. The Arab world is much less concerned about Israel than it was. The Gulf states are in an alliance, a tacit alliance with Israel against Iran, as we all know. And also, Britain is about to leave the European Union, although that's another story. But anyway, put that to one side. Once it leaves the European Union, it's going to be desperate for trade deals. And consequently, it needs to be very friendly with Israel. But beyond that, we don't know quite why the Duke of Cambridge is coming, but coming he is. And of course, there was no way in which such a visit wouldn't ruffle feathers on one side or the other. You cannot come to this region without stepping onto landmines. So eyebrows have now been raised,
right,
with 1 week to go, about his published itinerary.
Right.
Kensington Palace, which administers his official engagements, has released the itinerary. And the itinerary has raised eyebrows because it says, as we knew, he is going to be visiting Jordan, Israel, and what the British call the occupied Palestinian territories. So Jordan is as it is. Events as you may imagine. Israel, he's planning a visit to Yad Vashem. He is going to Jaffa to speak to young people involved in peace groups and so on. He's going to spend time with Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Rivlin. He's going to give a presentation, I think, at the ambassador's residence. So much is fine. And that will be all very great.
Right.
And then the next day, I think his final day, he is going to what is described as the occupied Palestinian territories. And this is where eyebrows have been raised, because his Kensington Palace's itinerary says he will be in the occupied Palestinian territories, he will travel to Ramallah, where he'll meet with President Abbas. So much is pretty obvious. The rest of the afternoon's programme in the West Bank will include events that focus on the issues facing refugee communities. So much is pretty obvious. That evening, he will give his final speech when he attends a reception at the residence of the Consul General in Jerusalem, which is, of course, in East Jerusalem. So much is pretty par for the course. And then the paragraph that has raised eyebrows. The next day's programme in the occupied Palestinian territories will begin with a short briefing on the history and geography of Jerusalem's Old City, from a viewing point at the Mount of Olives. From here, His Royal Highness will travel a short distance to the Church of St. Mary Magdalene, where he will pay his respects at the tomb of his great-grandmother, Princess Alice. Now, there are two things to note about this. The first, and of lesser importance perhaps, to me anyway, is that what he's only going to one thing
Right.
in the occupied Palestinian territories, so-called, a
Right.
church where his great-grandmother was buried. Surely he's going to other things.
Right.
Why aren't we being told? But the big point, of course, is that by implication, the old city is, according to the United Kingdom government, in the occupied Palestinian territories. And obviously, Israel is not going to take kindly to that at all. Israel has to put up with the fact that I think that it accepts as something it can't do anything about, the fact that Britain believes that that Eastern Jerusalem is over the line of occupation in 1967, and therefore it's part of the occupied Palestinian territories. But Jerusalem is considered something a bit different, and the Western Wall is the Holy of Holies. For the Israelis to hear it officially being said by their ally, United Kingdom, that the Western Wall is part of the Palestinian occupied territories, that's a red line that cannot be crossed. Now, what's interesting to me also is that on Ynet, which I don't know how reliable this is, but nevertheless it seems quite a well-sourced
Right. It's
report.
an Israeli website, an Israeli news source.
It's an Israeli settler website, I believe. It is the people, it represents people...
What? No, not at all.
No?
No, not at all. That's a left-wing liberal
It doesn't
news
represent
outlet.
people in the disputed territories?
Not at all.
Oh, I see.
Ynet is not sympathetic
case-
at all to Jewish settlers and resettlers like
Okay,
me.
in that case, I apologise if I've offended anybody, but it was done out of ignorance. Anyway, Ynet is saying that this is even more contentious than one might think, because he plans, according to Ynet sources in Jerusalem, Prince William plans to visit the Western Wall, but it's not said in his itinerary. It's been left out completely. He's not just going to stand up, and look at it. He's going to visit it, and this has not been said. And furthermore, the palace has yet to announce, says Ynet, which sites the prince will visit on the last day. Ynet has learned he plans to visit the Temple Mount, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, the Church of St. John the Baptist, and the Western Wall. As tours of these sites have been scheduled in advance, it's unclear why Kensington Palace has failed to include them on the official itinerary. According to sources in Jerusalem, the palace intentionally avoided mentioning these sites in a bid to prevent a politicisation of the visit. And so one can see immediately, the minefield opening up. And I'm sure Ynet is correct in this, that it's been left off the itinerary because it's just so difficult even to talk about it. And so the question is, will he actually go to these places? Will it be judged so inflammatory to one side or the other that he will not go to these places after all? Will he go to these places and the British won't say anything until afterwards? I mean, who knows what's going to happen? But for sure, it's not going to be a calm visit. Behind the scenes, people are going to be desperately trying to keep the show on the road with no diplomatic incident. And who knows what will happen?
I just think it's so funny, ironic. I mean, I know in one of the articles that you were just reading from, they were saying that they're the British Foreign Office is specifically not saying these things because they're trying to make this trip non-political. But yet, isn't it like impossible to come on a trip to Israel and not be political in one way, shape, or form?
But this is what the British think, you see. I mean, in recent years, to my certain knowledge, because I've had these conversations with officials in the Foreign Office concerned with Israel, they've tried to pretend that the politics can be left to one side. What we concentrate on, they've said, in the last few years is trade. It's this great relationship we have with Israel to do with high-tech, to do with, of course, intelligence sharing, to do with trading links. They big up all of that, and quite right. It's trading links have never been better. The relationship on that basis is an excellent one. That's all to be shouted from the rooftops, for sure.
Right.
But they then kind of say, so the politics don't actually matter. We don't have to talk about that. So they park it completely in their minds, like we don't even talk about that. Like bad manners to talk about that. And so that's a trick they're trying to pull with Prince William's visit. That he'll visit stuff which everybody can agree is fine. So everybody can agree that, Yad Vashem,
The Holocaust.
the shrine to dead Jews. Dead Jews are very safe, aren't they? We can all mourn dead Jews. That's fine. So we can spend a long time at Yad Vashem. We can really big that up. And okay, so he's going to meet Netanyahu, he's going to meet Rivlin. That's great because, after all, he's got to meet the Prime Minister and the President. And after that, he's going to go to Jaffa, which is very, it's even Stevens, it's Arabs and it's Jews, and they're all working for peace. And they're young people and they're playing football. And look at these young people, Arabs and Jews, playing football. What a note of hope that is for the future. And it is a note of hope for the future. I don't disagree for a moment that absolutely these are probably entirely worthy projects and causes, doing great work and offering hope for the future. That's all fine. But the idea that you can pull off this trip with that alone,
right,
and visit, historic sites without any kind of reference to the fact that they are fought over today in the way that they are, is, I think, unrealistic. But who knows? I mean, the British, are very serpentine in the way that they work. They've avoided a royal trip here for precisely these reasons, among other reasons. I mean, what do they want this kind of headache for? And now they've brought the headache upon themselves. How are they going to deal with it? I don't know.
Just an interesting point that I don't know how many viewers understand, but Britain was one of only, I think, 3 countries in the world that recognized Jordanian illegal occupation of the West Bank between 1948 and 1967, as opposed to all other countries in the world that did not recognize Jordanian ownership over that land while they were basically illegally occupying it. Again, I'm just bringing that up because it shows a sort of the complexity of Britain, even one of the last holdouts in the world, to not recognize.
Well, don't ask me to explain how the British conclude that the Jordanians were not behaving illegally, whereas Israel is behaving illegally. That the Jordanians were not in illegal occupation, whereas the Israelis are in illegal occupation. Don't ask me to explain that.
Well, it's not explainable.
It's simply wrong. It is simply wrong. And it's dictated, in my view, by politics. The whole of Britain's attitude to Israel and the Arab world is dictated by politics rather than law. And the appalling thing is that Britain goes around saying that Israel behaves illegally, and that's because Britain is all the time lining itself up with people, like it's lining itself up with the Arab world, the Arab bloc. It's lining itself up with its European Union allies. And consequently, because it lines itself up with where it thinks its interests are, it stands on its head and does a double backflip 10 times a minute. And will that change? I just don't know whether it will change. I mean, the way things are going, it seems to me Britain's going to be kind of left, with Federica Mogherini of the EU. They're going to be the last people on one side, allies to people sending the flaming kites and other weapons of war over to Israel. On one side, all basically saying the same thing, that Israel's in illegal occupation. And on the other side is going to be most of the Arab world who will be with Israel and with America. That's the way things are going. But Britain hasn't woken up to that fact yet.
And final thought about this trip: good or bad that he's coming? Good or bad that he probably will go to the Western Wall, even if the Foreign Office and Kensington Palace is not officially saying it?
Well, I hesitate because let's see where we are next week after he's been and gone. But the fact that he, if he goes to the Western Wall, that is a statement in itself, regardless of whether the British Foreign Office is saying the Western Wall is on the moon. Who cares? The Western Wall, is part of Israel. It is, one of the holy sites of Judaism. And to go to the Western Wall is to acknowledge that connection. It's to acknowledge the connection between Israel, the Jewish people, and the Western Wall of what was the retaining wall of the temple. And that acknowledgement in itself is incredibly valuable for a member of the royal family to be doing that. And the Arab world will understand that. Whatever they may say, whatever anyone may say about where this Western Wall is situated, the Arab world will understand that, and they won't like it. And consequently, I think it's a good thing that he will do that. Now, if he goes on to Temple Mount, I think that's more complicated. That's more complicated because Temple Mount is run by, the Islamic world. It is the great symbol of the Islamic world, and it's the great symbol of the Islamic religious war against the Jewish people.
Right.
So by him going to the Temple Mount, it kind of is a horrible kind of equation to the Western Wall. So in that sense, the British are playing it absolutely even Stevens. We'll give the Jews what they want, we can go to the Western Wall, we'll give the Arabs, the Muslims what they want by him going to Temple Mount. At the end of the day, is that going to cancel itself out? Possibly. I'm not sure. I'll have to look at what actually happens, but I'll all have to look at what actually happens. We'll all have to look at the optics, at what he actually does,
Right.
where he actually goes, what he actually does, because every gesture will be rightly scrutinized, and rightly scrutinized because every gesture will be choreographed.
Right.
He will do nothing that is not choreographed for a political purpose. So we have to just watch very carefully what happens.
Got it. All right. So I guess the next talk we're gonna go through it. We'll find out after the fact. All right. Let's switch to another issue. Let's switch to Trump and North Korea. What did we just witness? It was and I'll give the intro. We witnessed the beginning of a process, and it seems that Trump is very bullish that this process will succeed. Whereas the day before he was calling this guy a madman, now he is turning on his art of the deal personality and trying to suck him in and saying, yes, we can make a deal, and yes, it's going to be denuclearized.
Who knows what he said to Chairman Kim? Who knows? And it's possible that President Trump, like presidents before him, has been taken in by honeyed words by the North Koreans, and more particularly by the desperate need to believe that progress is being made. And at the end of the day, we'll see that America will have been led up the garden path once again. It's perfectly possible. However, I think things have changed. And what's changed is President Trump. President Trump is, as we all know, somebody who busts completely, has completely smashed to smithereens all the conventions of international diplomacy. And he does it all in his own way. And he's operating by his art of the deal.
Right.
And what we're seeing is him playing out his negotiating strategy. We can't really follow quite what he's doing because only he knows what he's doing. And clearly he goes a lot by instinct. And a lot of his strategy is based on going by instinct. So to a certain extent, his instinct is kind of part of the strategy, if you see what I mean. And he's telling us that things have changed. And what interested me was that Chairman Kim said things have changed. Now, Chairman Kim may simply have been saying that for for propaganda purposes, but he said something about. So he implied, or he actually said, things have changed, like, for both of us. And that was interesting to me, because, of course, the only thing that's changed as far as America is concerned is that it's no longer going to appease people like him. And as a result, China has been put under the cosh. China is facing the prospect of, devastating tariff trade wars with America. And it seems to me, what do I know? I say in my speculation, it seems to me that President Trump is using his trade war policy, which he believes in because he wants to have a fair, as he sees it, a level playing field between America and the rest of the world. But he's also using it as a bargaining chip, as a negotiating factor. So he's basically saying to China, I would expect, You come along with me over North Korea, and I will not hammer your economy. But if you continue to incite North Korea to break all the agreements made with me, you will find that I will come down on you like a ton of bricks. And it seems to me that's part of what Kim meant when he said things have changed. Plus, Trump will have been saying to him, look, you can have a great future here. You can, Trump seems to me to look at his enemy and size him up and make a decision about what does this guy want.
Right.
And so he's probably thought, well, Kim wants, he wants to remain in power. He wants to have a nice life. He wants to have all his privileges, and he wants to be sure that he can continue doing that. So if I were President Trump, I would have said to him, you have a choice. Either you can have a nice life, and we can help you have a nice life, and we can help you grow your country, and we can, you can be sure that we will leave you alone, provided you denuclearize. But if you don't denuclearize, we will destroy you. Either we will kill you, or we will starve your country into collapse. It's your choice. That's what I would have said about Trump, backed by China.
Right.
Now, has he said that? I haven't got the faintest idea.
Right.
But, start of a process, yes, we all knew it was going to be a process. We all knew it wasn't going to be, sort of peace in our time on day one. And we'll just have to wait and see. But there's a bigger game going on, which is the game with Iran.
Mm-hmm.
North Korea is not just a rogue state doing its own horrible thing vis-a-vis South Korea and all that, but it's, from what I've read over many years, it's the place where Iran has outsourced part, or if not a lot, of its nuclear weapons program. And consequently, if North Korea does denuclearize, that has tremendous implications for Iran. At the same time, one of the things that may be focusing Chairman Kim's mind is that Iran is now under the cosh already from sanctions, which are beginning to bite in a much more dramatic way, even than the Americans had hoped for. And consequently, North Korea is finding that its trading with the money it's making from Iran is about to dry up. So it's in a kind of pincer. That's what's changing. Now, these are big changes. And will that mean that keeps Chairman Kim honest? We haven't got the faintest idea. Does it mean that the situation is completely different from the situation that obtained under previous presidents? Absolutely.
So, bottom line, how skeptical should we be about this whole?
Skeptical, but cautiously optimistic.
Sounds good. I'll take that. I think it's a very good. No, I believe it's on the market. It's on the mark. All right, and finally, more United Nations. More United Nations anti-Israel activity. Here we're talking about the UN General Assembly passing a totally one-sided resolution blaming Israel for the violence that's taking place in Gaza. No mention whatsoever of Hamas. Obviously, it passes with a majority, but history was made on 2 points. One, there were a lot of abstentions, over 40 abstentions on that vote, which is amazing for any vote that's anti-Israel. Usually there are very few abstentions. And then the United States tried to pass an amendment to make it more balanced, where it obviously mentions Hamas's responsibility for the violence. And even though it did not receive 2/3, it passed with a majority. First time, I think, ever that a pro-Israel resolution / amendment passed in the United Nations. Huge. I believe that's huge. What do you have to say about what we just witnessed?
Well, it was very much a mixed bag, which is a tremendous advance when it comes to the United Nations.
Correct.
Because previously it was all unmitigatedly dreadful, and the whole thing was so completely against Israel without any kind of crack in that wall of opposition. So you have a situation now where the American amendment actually passed. It didn't get accepted as an amendment because the procedural rules of the United Nations mean that it has to pass with a 2/3 majority. But there were two big wins, as it were, for Israel in all of this. One was that a motion that the Americans put forward their amendment to blame the Hamas for the violence in Gaza. Algeria put forward its own motion to quash that amendment. The Algerian motion failed. It was failed by 59 in favour and 26 abstentions. So 78 were against Algeria. And that was a big thing for that motion to be quashed. And then the resolution itself, the American amendment itself, was passed by a vote of 62 to 58, with 42 abstentions. So most countries were in favour of a resolution condemning the Hamas. Now that is a very big advance, not to be gainsaid at all, not to be brushed aside at all. Something has changed at the United Nations. What can have changed, one asks oneself. And as with so many of these conversations, it's two words: President Trump. That's what's changed, that the United Nations for the first time is finding that its hateful feet are being held to the fire when it comes to its unconscionable antipathy towards Israel. Okay, there's a long way to go yet, but cracks are starting to show under the pressure from the Americans, who are making it clear, that they're not going to put up with this any longer. So it's a big thing to turn the United Nations round, and personally I don't think that they're going to succeed, but nevertheless they are making inroads. But then the Jerusalem Post has a breakdown of how people voted, and there were, within this great advance that has been made on behalf of Israel, there were some significant disappointments. As the Jerusalem Post notes, the biggest disappointment must be Africa. We know that Israel's Prime Minister Netanyahu has expended an enormous effort in wooing countries in Africa, but all but 8 African countries voted against Israel, including Kenya and Uganda, where Prime Minister Netanyahu has invested quite a lot of effort in talking to them in favour, to get them to be more favourable to Israel. And only Togo voted for Israel, while South Sudan, Malawi, Ethiopia, Cameroon, Liberia, Ghana and Rwanda abstained. Another big disappointment in the final vote was India, which voted against Israel on the American resolution. Now, this is not the first time that Narendra Modi has voted against Israel. One understands where he's coming from. He has a difficult line to tread vis-à-vis his Muslim population, and so on and so forth. And he's explained that in the past, and Netanyahu seems to have kind of forgiven him in the past, on the basis that relations between Israel and India are extremely strong. There's a very, very good relationship. It's a genuine relationship between Israel and Narendra Modi's India. But when push comes to shove, Narendra Modi's understanding of where India's interests lie meant that he couldn't vote with Israel or with America on that resolution, which is a disappointment. So, there are swings and roundabouts here. It's a complicated business. But as I said at the beginning, at least it is swings and roundabouts. At least it is a complicated business now. Whereas hitherto there was not a crack in this United Nations wall of hostility to Israel. So it's progress.
So basically, we should be thankful for the progress. Well, what does it give us? What is this progress? Why is it good? Is this historic? Is it good? Is it good?
Well, it's good in that it means that anything that suggests cracks forming in this wall of hostility against Israel is good, especially at the United Nations. What Israel gets out of it in the immediate term, in the immediate future, is negligible, except for the knowledge that things are beginning to move in this direction. Personally, I don't think they're going to move very far. Personally, I think the United Nations is institutionally corrupted because, when it was formed immediately after the Second World War, it was formed for one reason, in the aftermath of this terrible thing that had happened in Europe, never again. And so you bring together, the great powers to make sure it never happens again. That was fine.
Right.
Then what happened was that it became like the whole world. Now, since most of the world is run by kleptocracies, dictatorships, tyrannies, and anti-Semites, it's not surprising that if you have a world body composed of, the rest of the world, It's going to be institutionally, forever and all time, programmed against the state of Israel.
Right.
And that remains the case.
Right.
In other words, I think the United Nations is itself a busted flush. I would like to see the true democracies of the world form a united democratic nations. And, enough of this brotherhood of man, let's have world government rubbish. This is where we've got to. World government, brotherhood of man, leads us to a situation where the world body votes for genocidal lunatics, kleptocrats, dictators and tyrants against their victims. That's inevitable if you have the world structured as it is at the moment.
Right.
So, in my view, the only solution to this is to start again, as far as the United Nations is concerned. So I don't have much hope that America is gonna crack this. But nevertheless, anything that does create a less than united front for hatred and tyranny must be welcomed.
Right. And on that note, anyone who has not seen the video of Nikki Haley's speech in the United Nations last week, I highly suggest you watch it, because she blasts the hypocrisy in black and white. She goes, there's this atrocity, that genocide, this atrocity, this country, and the United Nations doesn't deal with any of this, but you have an agenda playing politics, being anti-Israel.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, all credit to her and all credit to the United States for doing this. And, it should continue to do it.
Right.
Because the world needs to be put on notice that the world body is as it is. And so, from that point of view alone, it's good that this is happening.
Right. Well, Melanie, always a pleasure. Thank you so much for your time. Anyone who has not yet subscribed to Melanie Phillips, go to melaniephillips.com, sign up for a newsletter, get it straight into your inbox. And obviously Melanie's books, you have to read them. Actually, I have to give this comment to Melanie. I was in a ride this morning, and I'm talking to them, what's your day like? Oh, I'll be interviewing Melanie Phillips. Oh my God, I couldn't put her book down. My husband read every page twice. I didn't ask which. What of your two new ones?
Wow.
My husband read every page twice.
Okay.
So fabulous reviews from your...
Thank you. Thank you to this anonymous person. If anyone's interested, these two latest books, one is my memoir called Guardian Angel, and the other is my first novel, The Legacy, which I'm very pleased if anybody reads either of them. So thank you.
Wonderful. All right, and buy those books. Go to our website. You can get the links. Go to Amazon. Search for Melanie Phillips. Everyone have an amazing day, an amazing week. Let's make it a good world. Take care. Thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching.